Hello, I'm Greg, and welcome to my channel, Midnite Oil Software, and another lunchtime live stream. I'm just again making sure my audio is working. As soon as I hear myself in the headphones, I have a little bit of lag. Yep, it's working. I'll take those off. So today we're going to continue working on my 3D space shooter program. I am prepping it to eventually add multiplayer support, and I'm basically trying to get it into a state, since it wasn't designed with multiplayer from the beginning. I'm just trying to get it into a good state where it won't be so difficult when we start adding multiplayer. And not only that, there was functionality that just wasn't in the game yet, like the player ship could not take damage, could not be destroyed. Excuse me. So that's what I'm working on doing now. Let me switch over to my monitor here. I had Bezzy examine this multiplayer prep document. I had showed this in the first live stream. This is basically my plan for adding multiplayer support to this game, and the preparation step is all the things I was just talking about. Getting the game into a state where we can add multiplayer without as much difficulty. I had it look at what I had already done and consider the fact that there are several components that actually expect to get the player ship from the scene. And that's going to break as soon as I create a player manager and start spawning and despawning the player ship, which I have to do if we're going to allow the player ship to be destroyed. And also, just by virtue of it being a network game, when players join the game, we're going to spawn their ship into the game. So with that in mind, I wanted Bezzy to look at my plan and refactor it, and mainly decouple these guys and use some kind of an event-based approach so that we wouldn't have to rely on finding that ship in the scene. And it did a really good job. It analyzed, figured out what components actually rely on the player ship, and then it actually advised creating a new player event system, which is fine, except that I already have an event bus. I have not imported my core package into this project, so I'm going to do that first. And then I'm going to have Bezzy reevaluate this and see how I can use the event bus that already exists instead of creating this new event system. But everything else is going to be pretty much the same, except that it's going to use the event bus. So it wants to create the player manager, which is great, and it's going to have methods to spawn and destroy the ship, which will fire those events. Which is fine. It also talks about refactoring for the existing components like the player health UI, the target indicator, the enemy ship controller, the UI manager, and so forth. All of those things are going to have to be refactored to subscribe and unsubscribe from those events. Just looking to see if there's anything in the chat. I don't know that I have anybody actually watching live now. So this is all fine. And I actually had to further refine that because it suggested me implementing things that were already done. It didn't realize that I had already completed some steps. So I basically told it to take into account that I've already added the shield to the player ship. I've already added the health bars and everything in the UI. So go ahead and update this document to reflect all that, which it did. But what I want to do now is I want to create a new browser here. And I want to go to my GitHub page. Actually, probably the fastest way to get to this is I'm going to go to my web page. And I'm going to go to this link here, which will take me to this. And actually, I want to go up to this one. Core. There we go. And we want to install this package. So I'm going to copy this URL. I'm going to jump back into Unity. I'm going to go into the package manager. And I'm going to click this little plus sign and say install package from get URL. And I'm going to paste that in there. and tell it to install. You know, I was recently going through a game dev TV course. I don't know if you know the guy from Llama Academy, I think his channel is called. He's got some really good Unity tutorials. Apparently, he's joined Game Dev TV, excuse me, as one of their instructors. And he has a really good course on developing an RTS, and I've been enjoying following that. And I noticed he implements an event bus in that course, and I actually like the way he did things a little bit better than my event bus. And I may at some point go back and refactor mine a little bit. It's not, I mean, it's mostly the same, but there's just some things that, you know, my event bus actually maintains some state because I'm maintaining a collection of subscribers and stuff. He's just providing delegates and then an event for the delegate. It's a generic delegate with a generic event for that delegate. And he's not having to maintain any state, which, you know, when you're ever using any kind of a singleton and static, that can be an issue if you want to do things like, you know, domain reloading and stuff. So I might look into that, refactoring that a little bit later. But for now, we've imported my package. I'm going to go into the managers here, and I'm just going to say create empty, and I'm going to call this event bus, and I'm going to see if I can just add component event bus, and you can see Midnite Oil Software Core is listed there. So I'll go ahead and enable debug log for now, but now I've got an event bus in my scene. Now I'm going to jump back over to Bezier. And by the way, I know people are probably laughing at me using AI, but part of this is just to demonstrate what Bezier can do for people that aren't familiar with it. And anybody that's followed my channel long enough knows that I'm fully capable of making Unity games and writing code without AI assistance. But this is really a game changer, and I just really want to show it off. So we've already had it update this multiplayer prep. So now I want to tell it to re-examine the multiplayer prep and update it to use the event bus, which is now available in the scene, instead of creating a new, did he call it player event system? Player events. Did he just call it player events? Yeah, he just called it player events. And I'm going to put it in agent mode, so it will actually go ahead and update that document instead of suggesting changes to it. Let's watch its flow. Oh, it's compacting my thread history since this thread is getting a little bit long. So that I add a little bit of time to this. I really do need to add a Jeopardy theme. I use a Stream Deck, and I've got a whole bunch of audio stuff canned into there if I want to do things like sound effects. And I've got some things like stingers and junk like that. So it would be pretty trivial for me to just add one with some Jeopardy music. I want to stop that clock. It's getting on my nerves. Okay. Anyway, I'll examine the event bus and to understand its API, then update the multiplayer prep package. So it's examining the event bus. Now he understands the event bus. Looking at the content in the page, looking at the structure. So now it's looking at this multiplayer prep to see what it needs to change. Oh, wow. It said it hadn't updated it yet, but I was looking at it. Anyway, it's generating a new one. Crafting the multiplayer prep event bus. Oh, it's creating a new page with event bus in the name. Love the way it adds carefully there. Oh, one thing while it's doing that, I did create project rules. I updated the project rules and I added in some of my coding guidelines for things that I like to do in my projects. And I gave it some conversation rules. It should be referring to me as Padawan now. I'll have to go look and see if it does that. Probably because this isn't a new thread, it's not applying those rules yet. His fingers are getting tired. All right, so it's refactored the player manager. Well, let's look at this. It's created a new implementation guide that uses the event bus system, defines struct-based events so we don't create any garbage on the heap, follows my architecture standards, so that's good. It's looking at my core package here. So here's a snippet where you can subscribe to player spawned event. And then here's your handler. And then it's not showing the actual definition of that of the player spawned event here. And it's refactoring the player manager, player health UI, target indicator, and shipment camera manager, zero heap allocation, centralized event management, clean life cycle, multiplayer ready, follows project patterns. So here are my implementation steps. Event struct definitions, player spawn point component, player manager, blah, 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 blah. So let's take a look at the document it created. Huh, that's interesting. I want to look at this. Problem to solve. Using the event bus architecture. Here's the implementation guide. There's the player spawned event and the player destroyed event. So there's structs. They take a player, player index is local. So this is already anticipating multiplayer. Interesting. And, oh, we're going to have a player spawn point for where we want to spawn the player. This is interesting. Here's our player manager. So it's got a whole new class here, the player manager class. And here's the refactor for my player health UI. So here we will subscribe to these on spawn and on destroyed events. And here we will unsubscribe. When we're spawned, we'll set our tracked player. And we will clear it when we are destroyed. Here's what set tracked player does. Oh, good. So we get the player. We get the damage handler off the player. We get the shield component. We get the damage handler. We update their health displays. All right, so all this looks good. We're updating things in late update, which is the way you want to do for UI elements. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do now, I've got that selected. I'm going to deselect this. And I've got this in agent mode. Now, I do have this project under source control. So I did import a package, so that's why there are changes. I'm going to go ahead and say imported Midnite Oil software core package. And I'm just going to go ahead and commit that and push it. So I recommend if you're going to allow Bezy to work in agent mode and actually make changes to your project, use source control and commit your changes so that you don't, you know, if you break something, you can just revert it. So I'm going to go ahead and say following the design in the multiplayer prep event bus page, implement, let's see, create the events and player manager and apply subsequent refactors to existing components. I'm going to, before it does that, I'm going to come into my project and I'm going to create a new folder here. And I'm going to call it events. And I'm going to tell Bezy let me go look at that. I'm pretty sure it's going to be scripts managers. Yeah, scripts managers. And I'm going to go ahead and tag those so that it has a reference to what it is I'm actually, where they actually live. So it's not having to search for it. That's interesting. Let's see what it does. You know what? I'm going to stop that. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to create a new thread. And it's still got all that context. Y'all ever seen these Ember mugs? They're Bluetooth enabled, and they sit on a little base. It's a charger, and it keeps your drink hot, and you can use your phone to set the desired temperature of your beverage. It was a gift. All right, he has all the context he needs. He's going to create the event files and the player manager, and then he's going to apply the refactors to the existing components. He's going to start by creating the file. So it's creating player events, and it's correctly putting it in the scripts events folder. It's now under managers, creating player spawn point. Creating the player manager under managers, refactoring the player health UI. Now, I think this newest version of Bezier will also create and update actual Unity components in the editor, not necessarily just scripts. That was something that I think they had originally, and then they took it out because there were some issues. But if I'm understanding what I've been seeing on their Discord and all correctly, that functionality's been added back. So it'd be interesting to see. I don't know if it's creating any Unity components with this particular job here. And it should be following all of my naming conventions and my coding conventions and everything. So we're going to go and, of course, review this code and just see if it is honoring my conventions. There's some things I like to do, like I don't like to use direct comparisons to null for game objects, for anything that derives from Unity object, because it can bypass Unity's lifecycle management, and you can end up with ghost objects, and you can also get a dreaded null reference, not null reference, missing reference exception if the native C++ object was destroyed and it hasn't propagated up to the managed C# object. And so if you just, they basically overrode the bool and the equal operator. So you can just, instead of saying like if transform equals null, you can say if transform. And that Boolean operation, that comparison, will evaluate to false if the object was destroyed on the C++ side, or if for any reason it's not available. It's refactoring the enemy ship controller, so it's already done the target indicator and the player health UI. So I honestly feel a little bit sorry for junior developers, because basically Bezier is a junior developer that is operating under my guidance as like a architect or dev lead. You need a senior or somebody who at least understands what it's doing, so you can verify that what it gives you is correct and how to fix it if it's not. So I don't see AI immediately replacing seniors, but it's kind of hard to justify training up a junior dev when you can have an AI coding assistant like this that can basically work in a fraction of the time and give you at least junior level results. Okay, so it has modified 6 files. I want it to continue here. Yeah, and it's given me the option to throw away its changes or keep them. Because I'm keeping everything under source control, I'm just going to go tell it, yeah, go ahead and keep whatever you did, and then I'm going to go and look at what it gave me, and then decide if I want to throw it away or revise it or whatever. One thing, so even though I said I don't think AI is going to replace seniors in the short term, if I'm right and people are hiring fewer junior devs, then that means there's fewer junior devs being trained up to become seniors. So ultimately, even seniors could be made extinct. But I'm sure we'll adapt. We've adapted to every other technological innovation over the years. All right, so it says there's no compiler errors, but I wonder if Unity is actually recompiled yet. It looks like it has. Because otherwise, when I toggled over to Unity, it should have started building. Here's a summary of what it did. Yeah, there's warnings, but it's unrelated. Or there's one warning related to the new code. Okay. So it created these new files, and it describes them. It refactored these components, and it explains what it did. So we have no more GameObject.find calls. It's ready for me to move this into multiplayer. So it built in like the indexes and whether or not it's local player and so forth. We have dynamic spawning and despawning, clean architecture, struct-based events, so no garbage allocation, automatic camera setup. So the next things for me to do is add the player manager to the scene, configure the player manager, create spawn points, and remove old player references. So I can actually remove my old player from the scene and then test it. All right, so I'm going to say keep all. And if I bring up source control here, I'm using GitHub desktop. So you can see it's added these files and it modified these files. And I could go and I could look and see, you know, what it changed. Right? So let me just go into Unity. I'm going to move this off this to my other monitor here, and I'm going to follow its next recommended steps. So we're going to come up here, and under managers, I'm going to create empty, and I'm going to call it player manager, and I'm going to add player manager script to it, the player ship prefab, which is going to be the escort fighter. And let's go ahead and create a spawn point. Let me take this guy's current transform position. Ah, it's 0, 0, 0, so that makes that easy. You know, I probably should also ask it to have a random rotation. Well, let me just go ahead and make sure there's no overrides that need to be applied. There are some. Let me go ahead and apply those. And then I'm going to delete that from the scene. Go back to my player manager. What, is that a vector 3? What is that? I gotta wait for it to open up Rider. Player spawn points. Let's see what it did there. Oh. Looks like Ryder is still thinking. Getting the action ready. So there's an index and there's occupied. There's a vector 3 position. So it's not a scriptable object, is it? It's a mono behavior. Is there any reason this needs to be a mono behavior? I guess because they're doing on-draw gizmos. So why can't I just create one? So they actually need to be part of the hierarchy. So I'm going to come up here, and then in background is a good place. I'm going to create empty. I'm going to call it player spawn points. Actually, it doesn't need to be under the background. I've got asteroid fields here. Let me go ahead and add that down here. And I'm going to create empty. Player spawn point, and let's go ahead and drag that on there. Index is 0. It's not occupied. So do they not expose that vector 3? Oh, the vector 3 is its position. So I can just position it where I want it. So good. 0, 0, 0 is a good one. And just for the heck of it, I'm going to duplicate that. And I'm just going to call it player spawn point 2. And I don't know, let me just say something like 500, 500, 500. And let me just duplicate it one more time. Call it player spawn point 3, and let's make it negative. Actually, I want it to be something like negative 1500. And this one's going to be 1500. Oop. And we'll change this one to 1, and this one to 2. And I will come back up to the manager here, player manager. And let me just delete that. Lock this, pick these guys, and drag them into there. All right. Now, Bezzy also says add the old player reference So the player health UI no longer needs the serialized damage handler references. You can leave them empty. Where were they? Did it remove them from that class? Because I don't see them. They must have removed them, so that's kind of a ridiculous comment. Well, player ship no longer exists on the screen. Let me just hit play and see what happens. I see enemies, but I don't see any player. I do see some errors in the console, though. Nine errors. So the camera manager got an error. Cam.gameObject for each cam and virtual cameras. I bet I know what's going on there. If one of those virtual cameras was a cockpit camera and the player hasn't been spawned yet, that could be an issue. Yep, it's trying to set the cockpit camera to be active. That will fix that. So that will prevent me from dereferencing. Well, I guess. Well, it will keep me from dereferencing cam, and it will keep me from dereferencing the game object if either one of those happen to be null. Now, you might be asking, well, Greg, why don't you just say, right? The reason you can't use these null coalescing attributes like this is because it's what I was talking about earlier about the fact that I would do this instead of saying if cam equals null. Unity manages the life cycle. So you need to understand that Unity is developed in C++, not C#. Hey there, let it Stack Overflow. And so it manages everything in C#, but under the covers, it's all C++. And the life cycle of these objects is maintained in C++. And sometimes things can get out of sync. If an object is destroyed on the C++ side, it won't be null in C#. And you can get what's called a missing reference exception. And so this operator here bypasses that built-in Unity lifecycle management. So that is why you want to do this implicit, where this will evaluate to false if this has been destroyed on the C++ side. You never, ever, ever want to use these null coalescing operators or null interpolation for Unity objects, for anything that derives from Unity.object, which are mono behaviors and game objects, things like that. You can use it for things like C# events. So I bet you if we were to look at the player manager and where it's firing events, well, it did not obey my rules. I put this in my rules file. But where is it firing the event? Let me go look at my events. What did I change that it's? Oh, I made that one change. Let me go look at my events. Where are they? Assets, project, scripts, events. Player events. Oh, okay, so it's under project. Well, that should be right. Object, let's see, project, scripts, events. Where was I looking? You put it under scripts events. That's fine. That's not what I asked it to do, but that's fine. So let's go look at these events and see where they're called from or where they're referenced. Here's where we're raising one. So let's go look at the raise event, which is going to be in the event bus. Here we go. So all of this to show you this. It's safe to use this null interpolator here because this is just a pure C# class. It is not anything that derives from Unity object. So we don't have to worry about that Unity lifetime management. This is perfectly safe. Where it's not safe are places like what we were just looking at, where I was checking for null. Now, I do want to go in and clean up some stuff. So I put some rules in my project rules for Bezier that it patently ignored. Let me show you what those are. Never use null comparisons when the Unity lifestyle checks can be used instead, right? So it totally disobeyed that. I also told it to use early exit guard clauses, basically following writer's suggestion to invert if statements. And I just noticed it's not doing that. So let's go take a look at what I'm talking about. If I hover over this, invert if. Just reduces nesting, right? Here we go. I told it not to do this. So I'll go ahead and fix that. Do the same thing here. Now, I'm pretty sure if I told Bezzy to go fix these, it would go fix them all. But why it didn't obey the rules right off the bat, since they're explicitly specified in that rules file, I don't know why. I just don't know why. But just looking to see if there's any more of these. Doesn't look like it. Let's go ahead and test it again. And hopefully we won't be getting those compilation errors, or not compilation errors, runtime errors. I also want to make sure there's no other errors going on. Looks like the target indicator was giving me an error. Target rigid body. Player position. Okay, so once again, I'm going to do a to-do. All right. What were some of the other errors? Player health UI was giving an error. Enemy ship controller was giving an error. Oh. Why would that? Oh, sometimes the event bus is gone when it tries. So what I can do here is say if event bus dot instance but that happened when I exited the game, so I don't really think that's an issue that was preventing things from working. What about the enemy ship controller? I bet you it's something similar. Yep. It's on destroy. Now, that's the event bus. There shouldn't be an exception being thrown in there. Okay, I think I clicked on the wrong line. I did. Okay, same thing here. All right, let's just run this again. See if everything works. We're still not destroying the player ship. We need to implement that. But if this all works, I think I'm going to knock it off for today. I'm probably not going to stream the rest of the week. I'm going to be occupied at lunch pretty much every day this week, and I will not be able to do any streams. Okay, so it's not spawning the ship, but we're no longer getting errors in the console. So the task for next week is going to be to figure out why are we not spawning any ships. So I appreciate y'all tuning in and watching, those of you that did, and any of you that watch it after the fact, thank you as well. If you have any questions or comments, you can drop them in the comments on this video, but even better yet, you can join my Discord server. There's a link in the description for that. The link to the source code for this project is available. I think I'll put a link in the description. If not, I'll go ahead and make sure I do that. And you are welcome. Let it stack overflow. Thank you for watching. So anyway, y'all have a good one and good luck on your game development journey.